I always have a little smile to myself when this gospel comes around, because I remember many years ago, the first summer that I was ordained, I was on a youth camp, so lots of teenagers and young adults, and I was inspired, right? I was passionate, I was fired up, and I was saying to these young people that you've got to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world, that you have the light of Jesus to share with others. And I was really getting passionate and inspired about it. And in particular, I was saying the last thing we want to be is insipid, tasteless. And I kept saying, don't be insipid, don't be insipid, don't be insipid. Until one of the teenagers whose family I'd known since she was a little girl, she just went like this and she went, Chris, what's insipid mean? And everybody guiltily looked around and laughed, and I was like, that homily just got lost really, didn't it? So I'd focused very dramatically on that one word, but I hadn't bothered to define it. So there's every chance that you've had more than one homily from me where you found the same thing, right? Where you come out going, he talked about X for a long time, but I don't know what it was. So I hope it's not today. The word that I wanted to focus upon today in a particular way is actually a really innocuous word. It's a word that, of all the words we could pick here, be the word that you might sort of gloss over or miss or not focus upon, and that word is you. You. When Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth, you're the light of the world. I want to focus on that for a couple of reasons. One is that it's actually a crazy thing to say. So this passage happens just after the Beatitudes, which we heard last week. So it's part of the Sermon on the Mount. We've got no idea how many people were there. Maybe, like we're told there was a crowd, so maybe there's a couple hundred people. Let's be generous and say maybe there's even 1,000. And particularly Jesus is talking, of course, within that group to his 12 closest. He's called the 12 by this stage, the people who become the apostles. And there are others who've been hanging around for a bit. And he says to them, you are the salt of the earth, you're the light of the world. Surely they all sat there going, this guy is crazy, right? They're in this little place in Galilee. It's really pretty, but nobody there thinks they're anyone special or important, right? This is not the center of the Roman Empire. This is not an important place in world history, at least not at that stage. And he says to them, he doesn't say to them, you're the salt of Galilee, you're the light of Tiberias. He doesn't even say, you're the light of Israel, you're the salt of the Middle East. He doesn't say anything like that. He says, you're the light of the world, you're the salt of the earth. They must have sat there thinking, how could we, fishermen, ordinary people, how could we be entrusted with something so important? Can that really be true? They may also have been thinking, what on earth does the metaphor of salt mean? What on earth does the metaphor of light mean? We'll get to that. But before we do, there's one more thing we need to say about that word, you. It's actually you plural. I wonder how many of us, when we heard it, you, meaning like me, Chris, I'm supposed to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. But it's not actually just like directed as you singular, just to each of us as individuals. It's directed to us together. That matters. That's actually really significant. Now, we've all got a part to play. You can't use that as a cop-out, right? Oh, well, Jesus wants all of us, the whole church, to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world, so my response doesn't matter so much because there's everybody, right? It doesn't work like that, of course. But what he's actually saying, though, is that together we're the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Not as individuals. We tend to read the gospel or listen to the gospel through our kind of individualistic ears. Our culture talks about and focuses upon the individual so much, but Jesus is speaking to us. That changes things a bit, doesn't it? That together we're the salt of the earth. Together we're the light of the world. So, with that, what do the metaphors mean? Well, the first one's the harder one, the salt of the earth. What was salt used for in the ancient world? Well, a number of different things. It was used actually in temple sacrifice in the Jewish faith, okay? It was also used to preserve meat. In the days before refrigeration, if you had meat and you wanted to keep it, you'd salt it. So imagine eating a lot of beef jerky. That's really what's happening there, okay? The third reason, or the third thing that salt's used for, is the same thing that we use it for today, and that is for taste. And I think that's the meaning Jesus uses it in, because he goes on to say, well, you're the salt of the earth, but if you become tasteless, that's a problem. Now, that could sound really weird as well, because have you ever known salt to go off? Okay, it can get some moisture in it and you can't get it out of your salt shaker, but it still tastes like salt. If you manage to pick some out and you put it on your eggs or your chips or whatever it is, it'll still be salty, right? Salt doesn't go off. So how does salt become tasteless? There's two possibilities to this. One is that in Jesus' time, they didn't actually do what we do now, where when we eat table salt, it's pure sodium chloride, right? It's pure salt. But in Jesus' time, other things could be mixed in, and it's possible that you could actually in the process extract the salt out and leave the other minerals, in which case it would be tasteless, right? That's possible. Maybe not that likely. Here's the more likely thing. That what Jesus is saying is one of those kind of like hors d'oeuvre sayings. That salt actually can't become tasteless. That salt can't lose its properties of bringing season to food. In other words, it's kind of like a foolish thing to say. Why do I think that's the right interpretation? Because the same Greek word for insipid, tasteless, remember? The same Greek word for insipid is the same word for foolish. And in other parts of the Bible, we're told the word salt is associated with wisdom. So insipid is foolish, use salt and you're wise. So in the letter to the Colossians, St Paul says, use some salt with with everything that you say to one another, and you'll edify and build each other up. So in other words, to be foolish is what Jesus is really asking us not to be, and he's calling us to be wise. That in everything that we say or do with others, we're to bring wisdom. Now, I think that begs another question, and that is, what is true wisdom? Because the world's full of wise stuff, you know. I go scrolling through my Instagram feed, and for some reason the algorithm sends me all these aphorisms and sayings and epithets and all those epigrams and all those sorts of things. And I don't know, some of them I really like, but some of them really, they're Hallmark cards sort of stuff, What's real wisdom? What's true wisdom like? The second reading today, St Paul says to us that the wisdom that he brought, the wisdom that he came to bring, was the foolishness of Jesus crucified. He said, I didn't come with any great show of oratory or human wisdom. I only came to you with the knowledge of Christ crucified. And all of a sudden, our story just got a little stranger again, didn't it? Because a man hanging upon a cross does not look like wisdom in the normal face of things. A man dying as a victim of a political stitch-up does not look like wisdom in the conventional order. But the claim of Christian faith is that Jesus crucified is actually the true wisdom of the world, which is to say that at the very heart of God's order, God's wisdom, is the love that we see in Jesus, who gives himself for our sake. That's a different kind of wisdom, isn't it? And that's what Jesus wants us to show when he says you're the salt of the earth. The wisdom that you ought to display, the wisdom that you ought to evidence, is the wisdom of love, which would by seemingly more powerful things be trampled upon, rejected and abused over and over again in our world. and yet it's actually love that moves the sun and all the other stars if God's really in charge. That the wisdom of faith, the wisdom of Christian faith, is the wisdom of love. We're to be guided and we're to evidence that. If we're salt of the earth, then we're to show that kind of wisdom, the wisdom of crucified love. How do we do that? In really practical ways. Responding with a kind and caring word, even when somebody hasn't been that way to you. Trying to have a conversation which builds up rather than tears down. Having nothing to do with gossip or that which would detract from others' good name. It's reconciling when conflict does occur. The wisdom of this world is to show a kind of love and care and commitment to one another where other people see it and they say there's something really different about these people. There's something that is unusual, striking, and deeply attractive. That's the witness that we're called to show to the world. The second image Jesus uses is that we're the light of the world. Now, the thing that we want to make really clear here is that I look out at you and you're a very beautiful, attractive bunch, but you're absolutely not the light of the world. Okay? Jesus, elsewhere in the Gospel, says, I am the light of the world. He's the light. The light that we are to shine, because make no mistake about it, Jesus actually did call you the light of the world. But the light that he calls us to show is not our own light. I don't know about you, but I feel like my light sputters out fairly regularly in one way or another. The light that I'm called to show, the light that you're called to show, the light that we're called to show together is the light of Jesus. He's the light of the world. The earliest commentators on Scripture had a beautiful image for this. They said that we don't have any light of our own, which means we're like the moon. The moon doesn't have any light of its own. What the light of the moon, we've got beautiful, pretty close to full moon at the moment in our night sky. All of the light from the moon, of course, is the light from the sun. It's reflected. The light that we're to show is reflected from Jesus. For us to be the light of the world, we have to be deeply conscious that it's Jesus' light that we're to shine to others. Jesus does tell us too to make sure that we don't put our light in a bucket, that we don't hide it. Now that's not to draw attention to ourselves. He says when people see your good works, they're actually to praise God because they see that the author of what's happening is God. It's not that they care about what you're doing per se, but they see God at work in you. To be the light of the world is not to say in any arrogant or self-aggrandizing kind of way, I've got the light. It's to point to Jesus, who is the true light of the world. We've got a couple of great opportunities in the next few weeks to be a light as a community of faith. Next weekend, about 400 people will descend upon Penshurst. They're going to spend Friday here with us in the church, and then we're going to go up to Parish for the rest of the weekend. They're coming from all over Australia and New Zealand to look at the question of parish renewal, how we can make our parishes become more missionary, more what God would intend them to be, in order for them to be more like the light of the world. And we're very happy to host that conference. It's run by a ministry called Divine Renovation, but it's an opportunity for us, and there'll be a number of people from the parish who'll be sharing from their experience of being here in the parish. There'll be others, about 60 people who are volunteers from the parish, who are going to be volunteering, doing things like, simple things like, here's the right way to go to your room, and would you like some food, and here's your name tag, and those simple little things that make a difference. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to just share a little bit of what we've received and what we experience here at St Declan's. The second way that we can be, I think, the light of the world is to think about Alpha at the moment. We're about to start Alpha again. I'm not even sure how many Alphas we've done now or how many hundreds of people in the parish and beyond have come and done Alpha with us. But it's a great opportunity for people to take a fresh look at Christian faith. If you've not been coming to church very long, it might be your first time in a long time, or maybe you know somebody who's like that, or maybe you've been coming for ages but you're looking for something that will refresh you, Alpha's a great spot to start. We get together for a meal, we watch a movie together, and we share and talk about it. It's really simple. It's a wonderful way to grow and deepen in Christian faith. It's another way in the invitation we offer when we ask others to join with us. It's another great way that we can be a light for others, not for our own sake, but so that they might see and encounter the light of Jesus. So my final question for you this morning would be, in what way are you a lamp, a light, a city on a hill? And in what way can you be a bucket, hiding your light? We can all do it. But Jesus invites us and he challenges us to really truly be the light of the world and to be the salt of the earth, as crazy as that sounds.